Hello, my name is Tracy Garth-Antonowitz, and I am here today to talk to you about understanding the life of an incident report. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about what it means to write an IR, how you can do that really well, and what happens after you submit one. I know there are some who might wonder why you need to confront situations or document them in the residence halls. There are plenty of things happening where it would be easier to just pretend it didn't exist and walk on by. But it's our job to make sure that people learn from their experiences and provide a safe educational environment where all are welcome. So I'd ask you to take a second and think about what would no policy enforcement look like in the residence halls. Do you think students would be able to study, to be able to sleep, and to live in an environment that is free from hate, harassment, bias, sexual harassment? I'm going to guess probably not. I know there's many RAs who are concerned about confrontation and worried about the impact. You're worried that your residents might be sad when you document them or get angry at you, or that they'll put up barriers that make it difficult for you to help build a community on your residence hall floor. But when you hold everybody to the same standards and confront violations of policy, it leads to happier residents who understand the expectations in their community. They feel safe and as though they can live there successfully. It removes barriers to community development and leads to happier, more satisfied RAs. Everybody makes mistakes, and that's okay. The goal of this process is to be educational in nature. It's our job to help students learn from their experiences, reflect on them, make meaning of them, and figure out how to not find themselves back in this situation again in the future. So once you've confronted a situation, you're going to write an incident report. The first step is logging on to Maxient, and your hall director will share the link with you. It's going to be really, really important that once you get there, you enable additional features by logging in. That will allow you to get the full functionality of the system. Make sure that when you're writing in the third person and being as detailed as possible. These two things together will allow us to have a clear picture of who said and did what. Finally, try to provide direct quotes whenever possible. That allows us to have a better conversation. These together will create a well-written IR, which your hall director will cheer for. Once the RA submits the incident report, it goes directly to your RHD, and your job is complete. Your RHD is going to review the incident report. They may have questions or need some rewrites or edits from you in order to make the most cohesive and strongest document as possible. From there, your RHD will create the case, with one notable exception that I'll talk about later. Your RHD will review the incident report and determine what, if any, policy violations have occurred and what are the most appropriate charges. From there, they will send the student a letter asking them to meet. Once the letter is sent, the next step is the RHD will hear the case. The exception to that would be if a hall director doesn't have time in their schedule, a case could be reassigned. So it's always best to just let a student know that someone will be reaching out, not necessarily their specific residence hall director. An RHD hearing a case involves a one-to-one conversation with the student or students who were involved in this situation that you documented. The RHD will ask them questions about their transition to Marquette, their choices and behavior for that evening, and the impact that it had on the community. Once the meeting is complete, the RHD has 5 days to reflect on the situation, to think about the conversations that they had, and think about what's the most appropriate outcome for the student involved. Once they get their ideas and know what they're going to assign, they will sit down and type up a letter letting the student know their outcomes. The student receiving the outcome letter, as well as working to complete the outcomes, is the final phase of the process. Generally, RHDs have a menu of options they can choose from, as well as some creative sanctioning license. Some policy violations, such as alcohol or drugs, do carry a monetary fine that is used to cover the cost of services such as online tutorials or assessments. Additionally, students are often required to perform some sort of educational sanction. We know that these two together yield results. What percentage of students do you think go through the conduct process? It's actually less than 10%. And we know that the educational process we provide makes a difference because less than 25% of students come through more than once. So we know that the work that you do and we do make a difference for our students in this area. Remember when I said there's an exception to your RHD creating the case? It may be sent to the Dean of Students if a student is facing probation, suspension, or expulsion. From there, it'll be reassigned to a campus hearing officer. Again, why it's best practice to always just let students know that someone will be reaching out, not necessarily your hall director. A well-written incident report is truly the foundation of the conduct process. It allows us to have a clear picture of what was said and done that evening, the choices and behavior students engaged in, and how to best hold them accountable. Next, we're going to go through a couple of scenarios where you can see the difference in how a conduct meeting might go based on the quality of the IR. So here's an example of a bad incident report. R.A. Gomez and R.A. Johnson were on rounds. He saw Eve Jones sitting outside covered in vomit. The RAs talked to her for a while and called MUPD to make sure she was okay. Eve didn't really want us to call MUPD, but was cooperative. Eve said she was fine and could go back up to her room. Now let's compare a well-written incident report. At approximately 2:15 a.m., SSO Smith came to R.A. Gomez and R.A. Johnson, who were standing in the lobby, and stated there was a resident outside the lobby who had vomited. At this point, R.A. Johnson and R.A. Gomez went outside and saw resident Eve Jones. Resident Jones had vomited on Resident Jones's clothes and hands, and no one was with Resident Jones. R.A. Gomez and R.A. Johnson asked Resident Jones if Resident Jones had been drinking. Resident Jones hesitated and eventually said, "Yes, I was drinking this evening." Resident Jones stated that Resident Jones had 6 or 7 beers throughout the night and drank too fast. R.A. Gomez contacted MUPD for an assessment and RHD on duty Anthony Gabriella. When Resident Jones was told that MUPD and the RHD on duty were coming, Resident Jones called the RAs on duty a couple of narcs who like to ruin everyone's good time. MUPD and RHD Gabriella arrived together. MUPD gave Resident Jones a breathalyzer at 15-minute intervals. Initial results for the BAC was 0.13 and the second was 0.12. MUPD said Resident Jones did not require hospital transport due to BAC lowering. MUPD and RHD Gabriella left at 2:47 a.m. and RAs Gomez and Johnson escorted Resident Jones upstairs. How are those reports different from each other? Take a second and reflect on what are the main differences between the two reports you just heard. Report number 1 didn't use the third-person narrative, and while this report may have been short, when the reports are 2 to 3 pages long, the he's and she's and they's and them's become very confusing. It lacked detail, it was hard to understand what had clearly happened that evening, and there were no quotes, which makes it difficult to hold someone accountable for inappropriate comments. Meanwhile, report number 2 shared a third-person narrative that made it easy to understand who said and did what. There were a lot of details, and you got a clear picture of what happened throughout the course of the incident. And finally, there were quotes to help guide the conversation between the RHD and the student. Which report do you think will lead to a better conversation and better outcome with the student and RHD? If you said report number 2, you get 2 big thumbs up. I hope that this short video helps you to understand the life cycle of an incident report. There are many steps along the way, and your work is integral to the success of this process. You have a team of hall directors and others here to support you and offer guidance. Know that we appreciate your efforts and all the work that you put in to make the conduct process work here at Marquette.